If you don't use the information I'm about to give you, you could be leaving tens of thousands of dollars on the table. In this video, I'm going to tell you what is happening in the Los Angeles real estate market for March of 2024. I'm going to tell you what economists are predicting for mortgage rates for the rest of the year, house prices for the rest of the year, and the economy, including foreclosures. This is going to be great information for buyers and for sellers. So make sure you watch until the end of the video. And if you have any questions, you can always comment down below or reach out to me. Let's jump into mortgage rates. As of filming, mortgage rates are about 7.11%. Now, what determines a mortgage rate? Typically, it's the spread between the 10-year treasury and the actual rate. Now, the 10-year treasury is about 4.21%, which gives us a 2.89% spread. The reason why that's important is because the spread over the last 50-year average has been 1.7. So typically, once we find an equilibrium, it will be right at about 1.7. We're a little bit higher than normal, which means that investors are afraid of the risks of inflation. Mark Fleming, the chief economist of First American Title, said a primary driver of the increase in the yield over 2023 was inflation expectations. So the higher the current rate of inflation, and more importantly, the higher the expected future rates of inflation, the higher the yield on the 10-year as investors demand to be compensated for that inflation risk into the future. So basically, investors are nervous that inflation is continue to be bad and they want to be compensated for the risk of lending money. That's why interest rates are at the point that they are right now. Now, the reason why this is so important and the reason why the Feds are being very, very cautious about cutting rates too quickly is because what happened in the 1970s when inflation was at 12%. If you look at this chart, inflation was at 12% in the mid 1970s, and the Feds aggressively cut interest rates, and it went down very, very quickly. But the fundamentals of the economy were not great, and then inflation shot up to over 14%. So the Feds right now are trying to avoid a repeat of what happened in the 1970s, which is why they're being so cautious about cutting rates too aggressively. Their goal is to try to get inflation around 2%. Right now, we've been hovering about 3% of inflation. So we have a little bit further to go in order for the Feds to feel comfortable cutting rates more aggressively. Now, what does that mean for mortgage rates going forward in 2024? If you look at this chart, Fannie Mae is still predicting by the end of 2024, the fourth quarter, that we're going to see interest rates at 5.9%, which would be amazing for our real estate market. But if you're a buyer, you need to be very cautious because what is going to happen when interest rates start to go down below 6% is all of those buyers who have been waiting on the sidelines until interest rates go down, they're going to come back on the market and they are going to start flooding, and you're going to have a lot more competition to get properties than you did when interest rates are a little bit higher. Now, if you ask economists in January of 2023, 61% that there was likely going to be a recession in the next 12 months. Now, if you update that to January of 2024, only 39% said that there's a likelihood of a recession in the next 12 months. Most are predicting that there's going to be a soft landing. And I think that's one of the reasons why the Fed is so cautious about cutting interest rates too early. Now, the Wall Street Journal is also anticipating that unemployment is going to stay under 5%, which is a really good benchmark for unemployment. So that will mean a really strong economy for the next 5 years. And Jacob Channel, the senior economist for LendingTree, says at least right now, the fundamentals of the economy, despite some hiccups, are doing pretty good. While things are far from perfect, the economy is probably doing better than people want to give it credit for. There have been some reports about foreclosures increasing, which is accurate, but let me give you some context that will make you feel a little bit better. If you look at this chart from Blacklight, you will see that active foreclosure inventory is down 2.2%, which is 25% below pre-pandemic levels. Foreclosure sales are down 17%, and foreclosure starts, which means like the notice of default that start that process, is 17.9% down. This chart really helps reiterate how much fewer foreclosures are in the last 5 years than they were before the pandemic. In fact, 1.45 million less foreclosures in the last 5 years than there were before the pandemic. Okay, let's switch gears and talk about home prices. 1 out of every 5 people that you ask will say that homes are going to depreciate over the next year. But here's what actually happened in 2023. These are the final numbers from home appreciation from December of 2022 to December of 2023. And as you can see here, a lot of these were 5%, 5%, 5.6%, 7%, and 6.6%. Now, these aren't national statistics, but if you look real closely at what is happening in Los Angeles, check out this chart. In Los Angeles, we appreciated 8.3%. So those buyers in 2023 who said, oh, I'm not going to buy a house because interest rates are too high. Let's say they bought $1 million house. You missed out on 8.3% appreciation, which is the equivalent of $80,000. That is what I'm talking about when I'm saying don't wait for interest rates to go down, because you are going to be missing out on all the appreciation that you could see over the next year. This is why I always talk about national versus local. If you look at this chart, everywhere in the country had some appreciation in 2023. And if you look in California, that's 4.9% appreciation for the whole state. But if you look at Los Angeles, we appreciated at 8.3% versus 4.9% for the rest of the state. Los Angeles is a different beast than you see in other parts of the country. So anytime you hear national headlines, make sure that you know what is happening locally, because it is a very, very different story. Now, where are prices going to go in 2024? If you look at this chart here, 8 economists are predicting that homes will appreciate. Now, they're not going to be anything near the unicorn years of COVID where things were appreciating 10, 15, 20%. But things are still appreciating. If the average is about 3.2%, and at the high point, Goldman Sachs says 5.5%, and NAR says 1.4%. Now remember, these are national statistics. LA beat the national statistics by almost 2%. So just keep that in mind if you're thinking about buying or waiting, because you could lose out on a lot of that appreciation. And if you look even further into the future, the Home Price Expectation Survey, which does a survey once a quarter, is expecting that homes are going to appreciate 3%, 3%, 3%, 4%, and 4% over the next 5 years. Why is that important? Let's say you bought a $900,000 house here in Los Angeles in January of 2024. And let's say for the next 5 years, homes only appreciate 3%. You would be leaving $143,346 on the table if you don't purchase now and get all of that appreciation that is expected to happen by most economists. Now, let me tell you what I'm seeing right now in the field in Los Angeles. I just closed 3 buyer transactions over the last month. One was a $700,000, one was 1.1, one was 1.9. 2 of those buyers had to deal with multiple offers on different properties. One, we got outbid by $50,000 because there were 9 offers in Larchmont. There's another one in North Hollywood that we outbid 10 other buyers, and we had to go over $130,000 over the asking price. I'm seeing that right now with 7% interest rates. Can you imagine what interest rates are going to be like if they are at 6% or 5%? It's going to get a little bit crazy. If you are a buyer or a seller, I have free buyer guides and seller guides in the description down below. And you can always reach out to me directly at 213-268-6832 to ask any questions that you want. I'd love to help you find a place or sell your home here in the Los Angeles area. Again, my name is Felipe Crook, investing in your dreams.